Okay. Oh, huh. Okay, I think we're recording. It usually has a little cloud for me, but this one has a dot. So hopefully I don't mess it up. So this week we have session 5 reflection. We have a whole slew of things to accomplish. Um, the discussion board, the discussion thread, the assignment, the quiz, and the revision of our academic paper. So I was working on those a little bit today already, and so I'm hoping to finish them up today and tomorrow. I think I can get them all done. It's way better than it was last week. So, and I am hoping I don't miss anyone this week. And I'm so sorry about missing both of those last week for the session 3 literary analysis. I can't believe I did that, but I totally and completely opened my computer differently than I always do. And then the day someone notified me, I opened it the correct way, and then I was so embarrassed. I'm so sorry because making you wait is just wrong. And it's against the rules. You're supposed to have it by Friday. So I'm very sorry. So this week we are tackling basically the two key things, the discussion thread and the paper itself, because the quiz is sort of on your own. If you want help, don't ever hesitate to send a message. And then of course the revisions are a lot like the ones for session like the ones for the session 3 paper. They'll be very similar. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send a message and ask. So our ideas here are to essentially evaluate what the course has been and done. Ages ago, the phrasing was, so what? Which sounded a little harsh, but essentially that's the idea. We say like, so what happened? What did we learn? What did we take away from it? What do we keep and use for future courses? And I think that's a really good question to ask any and every course, because it's going to be really, really different depending on what that course covered and what kind of topics it used. But it's a good question because you may think, oh, well, that course was about, and it couldn't possibly, but then it really will if you ask that question and you push forward with it. So things like concluding on how the concepts in this course will help you in your chosen discipline and applying these skills in the future. And I think obviously we are all learners, especially with things like APA. Writing isn't about one perfect sentence. There are so many ways to do it well, to do it correctly, and reading and writing are going to help you continue to always grow in that. So I like to encourage reading as that great step for writing, because you're going to see how so many people do it well, that you'll see that they have other ways of putting their sentences together that maybe you aren't as familiar with or comfortable with, but they're still right. And so you'll learn lots of good steps and approaches and hopefully expand your possibilities. So here are the 4 key questions, 3 questions, I guess it is. What is your current major and why did you select it? Based on what you learn, identify a writing skill that you're going to use and how that skill applies to your major, and consider your current occupation or what your future career goal is and how that may factor in as well. So as we learned already, many writing skills are transferable between the types of writing, between the way that we look at them, but there can also be unique elements and challenges depending on specifically what we're looking at. So try to sort of expand that and see what you took away from it. I think a lot of these, it's really hard because I don't want everyone to have the same answer. I want you to have the answer that works for you. And it can be really focused, like I learned more about commas and that really just helped me rethink things, to really big ideas like I learned about organization and how I really want to focus on those ideas. So hopefully you'll find good examples for you. So how could we look at them? I divided them up into sort of 3 conceptual ideas. 1, technical. It can be things like sentence structure, grammar, punctuation. It could be organizational, learning the 5-paragraph paper, learning how that can shrink to 5-sentence paragraph and grow to a 5-chapter book. Or it could be conceptual, just that you have started to think about who an audience is or what you want to get across, or that you have things to communicate that you didn't realize you had. So there are lots of possibilities. I hate to hem anyone in for any specific ideas because I just feel like there are so many possibilities. But that's a great space for a question. Like, do you feel like you have an idea for the discussion thread? Like, does it feel like that's going to be a big reach that's really stressful? Or does it feel like, I kind of have an idea or there's something that I've been thinking about? And then I'll be silent for a moment and let you chip in if you want. I'm going to share this one. So the paper takes a different approach. We're looking again at the reflection idea, but the questions are, I feel like they're just a little too much. So if we look at them and we look at this list, so as you can see, that's quite a list on this PowerPoint. Why do you think what you learned was important? What from this course will you take into your next course? What concepts did you learn that can help you in work, home, community? As you can see, each one of these could be a paper in and of itself. So rather than using them as sort of a Q&A format, like here's a question, here's my answer, I want you to think of them as a springboard. We're still doing that idea of the 5-paragraph paper. And so I hope that that's still what you will focus on turning in. But if you looked at all of those questions and you tried to squish all of them into a paper, it would be really hard because even just the one question here, the third one, what concepts did you learn that can help you in your work, home, or community? That could be an entire paper because you could pick a concept for each of those locations, or you could pick one concept that you can use in work, in home, in community. As you can see, that could really, really grow. So instead, I want to think of it more as a roadmap, and I want to play with a pages document and sort of grow it ourselves. So the key questions aren't why or how, but okay, what now? What am I going to do next term when I have a paper on a subject, when I'm assigned a short answer response? What am I going to do? How am I going to take these things and make them work? So that to me makes these ideas secondary. Like they are, what idea do I want to use? How should I approach it? Oh, let me take that work and home idea. Or, oh, I want to use it in a community form. So let me grab that idea. I want you to take and grab them. So it could look a little bit like this. So whenever I start a paper, it always starts the exact same way because it's my way of sort of breaking through that it's not a white sheet of paper anymore, that it's been written on. So it's breaking that wall, that barrier down. So I always start by saying, look, you're going to need an introduction. You're going to need at least 3 points. You're going to need a conclusion. And so I write this stuff down just to get me started because it feels like I've started at that point. And then I can start tackling it and seeing what I want to put into things. And I start adding little words and phrases, and then I start adding sentences and quotes, and then I just keep growing it from there. So some examples could be the 3 most important lessons that I will take from this course are X, Y, and Z, and then you could plug in what you are most interested about. You could say the 3 key concepts that I will use in my courses, work, and home, and then expand that. X could relate to coursework, Y academics, Y could relate to work, and Z to home, or any which way. So let's go look at that. I'm going to share a different screen, this one. So I keep a template of our APA paper, but instead of having the school template that has all these like examples and quotes in it, I keep this one, which is much smaller. As you can see, it's got my go-to starting point on it, and then it's ready with Bible references just so that I have some examples and I don't feel like just alone there with my references. So what I like to do with my template, the very first thing I do is I open it up and then I go, I'm doing pages, so it's a little bit different, but I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to make my new copy, and then I'm going to name that. So session 5 paper. Oh, I also like to have all of my key details. So like English 103 session 5 paper. Now let me share the right screen because I just moved it, didn't I? So now I have a new paper with a new title. And so I've kept all of this information. And that's where I start to just add stuff in. So as you can imagine, if you were working on this, you could just have your name already in it. And then you don't have to worry about adding it every single time. You would just need to add the course number, the instructor, and the due date. So lots of good details that you can just keep and add all of the time. So my title is going to go up here. We're going to do reflections, if I could type. I always get nervous with these and type terribly. Reflections for English, that'll work. It's kind of random, but it works. And remember, my title is going to immediately go here. And it's only in those two places. It's going to be on the title page, but it's also going to be on my very first page. And then after that, no more. We don't need it. So then we can think about those ideas for our thesis. I like to have that superlative idea, that idea of saying, well, the three key things, or the best thing, the most important thing that I've learned. So I could go that direction. I could say the most important concept I've learned. I have. Remember that we don't use our contractions. Or I could actually type it a little bit differently. We'll fix it in a second. Remember that it's always movable and changeable. So whatever we're going to put in here is the most important concept I have learned in this class. And I will apply it to my work, to my academics, work, and life, and community. How's that? So what kind of concept could we use? What if we use something like organizing, like the 5-paragraph paper? So I could say something like organization. That means my first point, I could talk about how that organization, using the 5-paragraph paper, will help me in my academics. And then I'm going to say the same thing each time. I'm just going to keep adding that idea because I also want to use it for my work. And then I could say that I want to use it for my community. And then I start to add to those things. So for instance, for community, we could talk about how having that organizational structure is going to help us if we need to present something for our homeowners association or a community action program. And then we can talk about how that is useful in that sense. So really, there are a lot of ideas for this. And as I mentioned, it could be conceptual, just that we're talking about how we see writing in a new way. That can be a really open concept. It's not just about the specifics of writing, but it's about saying, you know what, now I realize that I am communicating in all of these different ways. Or one of my favorite things about writing is that I like to use punctuation as my tone of voice and my movement. So I love things like dashes because they're very dramatic. And so they're going to add this flair. Like, you have to be really cautious, can't use too many. But I love that. I love adding something like a dash so that people get that drama and that emotion that I want to share in my work, so that it doesn't feel just sort of staccato. I can have that movement of semicolons and colons and dashes and all of that. So any of those ideas are totally possible. But again, think about how the core concept of the class is a 5-paragraph paper. It's using that building block of always having my introduction with my thesis, then setting everyone up with my thesis to share what my stance is and what direction I'm going to go, and then going that direction. So remember, if I say academics, work, and community, I can't then go in and tackle work first and academics second. I have to make sure it matches. I'm setting up all of these parallel structures. Sorry. I'm setting up all these parallel structures so that the mind sort of walks through it more carefully and confidently. It's a lot of those really little things that make a strange amount of difference. As human minds, our brains, we just like things like parallelism, and we like seeing things in order and structured. So, right, I'll go undo because I can't do that. And then you may find it a little bit difficult again to have a reference. So if that's the case and you just really don't find one you want, then go ahead and remove references. Try to aim for maybe something really general. So a particular verse that you feel addresses the concepts, like, so does it address organization or does it address communication? And then you can find that sort of space. And of course, if you're stuck, I'm always here to debate those ideas too and figure out the best possible one. Let me see. I think that's the only ones. Oh, I liked this one too. I feel like I wanted to make sure everyone looked at the announcements as well. The dashboard. So on our course shell, if you go to the dashboard and then scroll through the announcements, because in both of those places, I've tried to write ideas on how we're tackling this, that we're trying to look at those concepts as sort of building blocks. Because again, if you look at your paper and you see this whole list and you try to squash it all in, it's really going to be a Q&A, and it's going to be like, well, here's a question in a small paragraph, here's a question in a small paragraph, or it's going to feel really hard to fit it into a small paragraph, and you're going to feel like you have to write an essay almost on every single question. So look at them more as stepping stones to encourage thought processes, or as a springboard to dive into the real meat of what you want to learn and share and have experienced. It is a really good plan. It's on the, I think it's on the grading rubric for citations. So try really hard to get something in there. And if you feel really stuck with some sort of source, then don't hesitate to send me like your ideas, and then I can try to help you find a cool blog or a Bible verse that really works, or something along those lines. Part of it is that we want to add credible sources, and the other part is that we want to practice. And we want to practice our reference, we want to practice a citation, all those bits and pieces. So how does that feel? What kind of questions do you have about tackling the paper, the revisions, and the discussion thread? Hi, Anna, thanks for joining us. I meant to say that when I saw you. And then don't forget things like the examples. So like right here in the middle, I don't know if you can see my mouse. They just start dividing it up. You know, if you're studying nursing, you're going to be looking at science-based writing. So our academic paper may be more the one that you feel like you learn the most from, those kinds of things, right? So I think any outside source, it's just so good to use one and to practice. So if the Bible works, if you have a good verse that you want to use that you feel incorporates really well, if there is a blog that you want to use, if there's a book, I don't want you to feel like you have to go read like a whole article or book, but maybe you want to talk about writing and organization. So then you just go and you do a search on like organized writing or something. And then as you can see, Google starts to help me, like, that's an interesting question. How does it help our brain think and stuff like that? So you can look for that kind of idea, just doing a search, but you may also have people who really encourage and support you. So like I've started adding myself to a lot of really cool listservs where people will send me an email once a week of something that they're thinking about that I just feel is really encouraging or exciting or supportive. So something like that would be great. My newest Gigi step was that she encouraged everyone to not look at the big picture that's really big and scary, but instead to look for a single step that you can take. So that kind of thing would be great for a paper. Exactly. And if you want, you can just use the Bible alone. That's just one of the many resources that you could use. And that's why I love the template, having all of those examples so that you have all 3 Bibles already listed and you're ready to go. It's like my shortcut. And then, of course, if you want to use a Bible verse and you feel like you haven't found one that really fits or something, don't hesitate to send a message and I can help you track something down, because there is always something. And it's just hard sometimes to make the connections work when you're in a time crunch and the stress of getting it into a paper. But I really encourage everyone as well to make sure you're doing things like having these sample templates so that they are just ready to go and you start adding information to them. I always have my template and I just make a copy for students when I'm helping them out, or I use the start of that template to share with other people. So look for having those things so that you aren't stuck every time sort of figuring out APA or doing things like making sure it has double spacing and stuff like that. We want 2 lines here. We don't want any space between before and after paragraphs. So making all of that work when Word is designed for business formatting. So if you just open a document, it's going to give you like 8 points after a paragraph and stuff like that. So instead, make sure that your template is ready to go. You're just good to start it. But again, look for that 5-paragraph structure so that you start to have all of the pieces. It just makes it so much sort of cleaner and easier. And of course, it could change. You know, when you are looking really carefully at a topic, you may find that it really is blooming with 2 points or that it needs 4, but always be adaptable to that. Start with that core concept of 3 being a good number and then just see what that paper is calling for. And it is kind of hard to add those outside sources here. So don't hesitate to send questions because that is tricky if there aren't that many. When it's your own personal takeaway, it's a little tricky, isn't it, to add pieces like that to it. Oh, that's such a great question. Let me double check the assignment criteria. That is such a good thing that I should have had. I should have added. Let me see. It could have been in the announcement, but oh, 3 pages. So remember counting pages in our Do You Know series on our course YouTube channel for CCU. It has, do you know how to page count? So that first page that says number 1 and has the title doesn't count. And that third page that's already on my template. So my template always starts with 3 already. I have my title page. I have my first like body page that's going to have the title of my work and it starts to say, what's the introduction? What are the points? And then it has a reference page. Well, 1 and 3 don't count. So what you're looking for when you're counting is what pages have content, which pages are building up the concept that I want to share. So that first page with our title on it, that should start to build our content and then we could count from there. But watch those numbers. And yeah, I feel like it's kind of tricky if it's in the first like quarter of a page. I feel like at this stage in the game, I do count those and I'm like, you did it. But the further you get, the more a page count is going to be something like at least half to 3/4 of a page. I feel like at our stage of the game where we're really learning these ideas and we're practicing these concepts, I don't want to stress everyone out with like, well, how much is a page? But like I know if I turn something in and it was on just a quarter of a page, that page wouldn't count. It's usually about half to 3/4 before it really counts. But again, I don't stress that. When I'm looking at your papers, I'm looking at content and I'm looking at you learning how to organize and share and all these other bits and pieces that I want you to walk away with. And that's just something that you should think about for like more of a junior and senior level courses are going to look at things like that. And they're going to say that's too short. So try to get, I mean, it's really hard to get a full page. Like how can you get like to the last little line? Like people give some space. So I feel like once you get to half the page, everyone feels like, yeah, you're on that page. Like it would take a lot of changes in formatting to get you off that page. But it would be, you know, you're clearly sharing ideas on that page. But when you're just like on the top of the page, it's sort of like, we could change the formatting a tiny bit and get you right off that page. So I always try to think of like what the logic is when people are like, that doesn't count. Like, why are they thinking it doesn't count? But if you went for like an 11-point font, it would go right off that page. It would just disappear. So those are the kinds of things we're looking for. Like, what would happen if it did that? But again, if you tackle all these questions, it could look really overwhelming and exhausting. So make sure you're looking for the sort of question that really sparks some interest in you. I think for me, the main question that I have with all assignments is not entirely, you know, like, yes, we're looking at the grading criteria because we have to have a place of assessment, but how are you using this information? How are you using it to grow and to make it work for you? That's always sort of the most important thing to me, that you are taking this idea and you're really saying like, what do I get? What do I need? How have I, used this? Because that's really useful. And that's me mistyping a word. I'll fix that while we're here. So I hope that that sort of makes sense and that everyone has sort of some fun with it, because I think that that so what question is really good. Like, so what now? Like, what does this look like? And will you be changed? Oh, right. No, I haven't yet because my niece has them. So I'm very excited. I read like a page or two before she got her little fingers into them. I need to track her down. So I hope you all had fun, and I mean, as fun as English class can be. It isn't really fun, is it? And that you will remember to keep asking questions and always think of assignments the way our class does them. Like when we are looking at a discussion thread and an assigned project and a submitted one, we're always building them together. They don't like sort of take two divergent paths. The whole idea is that courses sort of build sequentially, and that they use a skill from the first session into the second, into the third, and they're leapfrogging that information as you go forward. So whenever you're in a course, make sure you're looking for those steps to connect. Not that it's just an assignment and it's just something you're writing for the discussion thread, but that it's something that you are building as part of the overall structure. So especially with our quizzes and things, that's been a big change in our course, because we're trying to make sure that you are making all those connections. So all your courses are doing that. Make sure their whole fields of curriculum development. I'm not even on those. I just get called in as a specialist on the far end of it. So there are lots of people who really devote their time and attention to making sure you get all that. Oh, thank you so much. I always hope to make it at least a little exciting. So does anyone else have any questions about this one? I don't want to just keep you while I chatter about school. But again, look for something for yourself, not something that you think I want to hear, because I want to hear about you. Pick something that you really want to learn more about or understand, so that as you tackle these questions, you're really going, that's how that works. And it makes sense to you. I mistyped like half of these slides. They are even on our YouTube channel. So embarrassed. So thank you all so much for being here and doing all of this. Me making sure I don't spill my computer. Have a great week, everybody. Oops, that's not what I want. There's a button.